Well, two more facets of love found in chapter 4, verse 8 to chapter 5, verse 1. Chapter 4, verse 8, come with me from Lebanon, my bride. Come with me from Lebanon. Depart from the peak of Amana, from the peak of Sinar and Hermon, from the dens of lions, from the mountains of leopards. You have captivated my heart, my sister, my bride. You have captivated my heart with one glance of your eyes, with one jewel of your necklace. How beautiful is your love, my sister, my bride. How much better is your love than wine, and the fragrance of your oils than any spice. Your lips drip nectar, my bride. Honey and milk are under your tongue. The fragrance of your garments is like the fragrance of Lebanon. A garden locked is my sister, my bride. A spring locked, a fountain sealed. Your shoots are an orchard of pomegranates with all its choicest fruits, henna with nard and saffron, calamus and cinnamon, with all trees and frankincense, myrrh and aloes, with all choice spices, a garden fountain, well of living water, and flowing streams from Lebanon. Awake, O north wind, and come, O south wind. Blow upon my garden, let its spices flow. Let my beloved come to his garden and eat his choicest fruits. I came to my garden, my sister, my bride. I gathered my myrrh with my spice. I ate my honeycomb and my honey. I drank my wine and my milk. Eat, friends, drink, and be drunk with love. 10th, love is marital. Notice the term my bride occurs 6 times from chapter 4, verse 8 to chapter 5, verse 1. My bride. So they're married. They may be newlyweds, but they're married. And that makes the Song of Solomon different from so much Hollywood romance and the like, in which the action usually occurs outside of marriage. Here, this love has brought them into marriage, into a commitment that they dream will last until death do them part. C.S. Lewis wrote, to be in love is to both intend and to promise lifelong fidelity. Now, someone who doesn't have that first intent that it lasts and is then, second, unwilling to make a promise, a real promise, with witnesses, with a ring to prove it and a marriage certificate so that even the government is called in to testify to it. Someone who doesn't have that, who just says, sure, I love you, baby, but why fuss about rings and ceremonies and paperwork? Someone who thinks like that probably has no love. That's why I find it so tragic today. All this cohabitation, living together. Despite all the talk, all the passion, it's often so completely loveless. Because love is marital. 11th, love is sexual. Sexual. Starting in verse 11, leading up to chapter 5, verse 1, things are starting to get pretty hot there. There's a building sensuality here, the lips and the honey and the milk. Bride is a garden locked in verse 12. That is, she is, or at least was, a virgin until now that she's married. That chastity is celebrated. She was a spring locked, a fountain sealed. In other words, no man got to enjoy the pleasures she offered until now that she's married. Now he is enjoying those pleasures in verses 11 to 16. So there's this pleasing aromas, this list of refreshing, sensual, lovely things, refreshment, like from a spring of fresh water. And then at the end of chapter 4, into chapter 5, verse 1, hey. And here's the great irony about the debate on how to interpret the Song of Solomon. Some say it has to be allegorical, that it's symbolic language, that's symbolic language used to describe other truths. They say that because they assume no truly inspired spiritual book would be about sex. But it's not usually allegorical, because that's not how the original author intended it. For example, you go back, when he writes in chapter 4, verse 1 and on, we didn't read that part, but these poetic comparisons, some of the things that Song of Solomon is best known for, seems strange to us, almost kind of funny sometimes. Your eyes are like doves behind your veil. Your hair is like a flock of goats. We don't usually think of that as a good thing, but your teeth are like shorn ewes, on and on like that. He means literally to praise her beauty, her looks. He's using analogies, but it's not allegorical. And the original author never would have understood our hang-up that it can't be inspired and physical, even sexual, at the same time. But in kind of a funny irony, just here, in chapter 4, verse 16, and chapter 5, verse 1, it's allegorical there. The language is symbolic. That's not about gardening. There's no gardening going on there. If you think she's saying, let's go out and pull some weeds. No, that's not what's going on here. Love is sexual. People do sometimes need to be told this. I know of young women getting married at 18 who were totally shocked that their wedding night included sex. No one told them. Instead, there was this attitude like what I told those Korean seminary students, just don't talk about it. Sometimes married couples suffer for years with some kind of sexual dysfunction because they won't talk about it. Sometimes serious marital problems, even affairs and divorce, happen because one partner decides the marriage isn't going to be sexual anymore and the other doesn't know how to talk about it. Now, our culture hasn't always been so hung up and afraid to talk about it. In my doctoral research, I found a Puritan church in which a wife took before the whole congregation the problem of a husband who was not having sex enough for her. And when you can figure that out, take a while to think about that, and when you figure that out, you've learned a lot about the biblical view of the body and sex and marriage and the church. Well, 3 more facets about love. In chapter 8, verses 1 to 10. Told you we're skipping around. Oh, that you were like a brother to me, who nursed at my mother's breast. If I found you outside, I would kiss you, and none would despise me. I would lead you and bring you into the house of my mother, she who used to teach me. I would give you spiced wine to drink and juice of my pomegranate. His left hand is under my head, and his right hand embraces me. I adjure you, O daughters of Jerusalem, that you not stir up or awaken love until it pleases. Who is that coming up from the wilderness, leaning on her beloved? Under the apple tree I awakened you. There your mother was in labor with you. There she who bore you was in labor. Set me as a seal upon your heart, as a seal upon your arm. For love is strong as death. Jealousy is fierce as the grave. Its flashes are flashes of fire, the very flame of the Lord. Many waters cannot quench love, neither can floods drown it. If a man offered for love all the wealth of his house, he would be utterly despised. We have a little sister, and she has no breast. What shall we do for our sister on the day when she is spoken for? If she is a wall, we will build on her a battlement of silver. If she is a door, we will enclose her with boards of cedar. I was a wall, and my breasts were like towers. Then I was in his eyes as one who finds peace. Well, 12th. Love is expressive, but private. Verse 1, oh, that you were like a brother to me. That seems like a strange desire to have, isn't it? But she explains why. If I found you outside, I would kiss you, and none would despise me. Like a lot of conservative cultures, they disapproved of public displays of affection, PDA. And so since they're in public, she wishes he was at least seen as a brother so she could kiss him without being looked down on. She's expressive, but knows that's reserved for privacy. In private, again, he touches her face and embraces her. Notice that phrase is repeated. 13th, love is worth waiting for. Verse 4 sound familiar by now? This is the 3rd time this warning is repeated in the Song of Solomon. The temptation with all this exaltation of eros is that we make finding it our number one priority. Always playing the boyfriend, girlfriend dating game, jumping at the first opportunity when we think we found it. And so people will, when they have that, when they fall into that, they'll give sex for it, they'll change their beliefs for it, they'll leave their family, they'll lose friends, and think they've made a good exchange, all because they've been spending their youth stirring up and turning up their craving for love. And they thought it was innocent enough while they were doing it. There are even Christian romance novels. Parents will be constantly talking, maybe in prayer, about who you're going to marry, talking about boyfriend this, girlfriend that. And they'll think, what's wrong with planning ahead? Even if you're planning a wedding and you're single. What's wrong? What's wrong? You're stirring up and awakening love before it pleases, before the time is right. You've set a little fire, like setting a campfire, and you hope nothing will go wrong, and maybe God will be merciful to you and send someone before the fire gets out of hand, becomes a wildfire. But maybe he won't, and you find yourself getting burned by a fire set too early. Instead of stirring up love in verse 6, set a seal upon your heart. Guard your heart, Proverbs chapter 4, verse 23 says, with all vigilance, for from it flow the springs of life. Set your mind on things above. Colossians chapter 3, verse 2 says, don't waste your youth in search of eros, the perfect relationship, in the hopes that once you get that out of the way, you can then turn to the Lord. No, it doesn't work like that. Set a seal upon your heart so that this quest for love doesn't take over. Because if it does, verse 6 says, love is as strong as death. Jealousy is as fierce as the grave. It's flashes. I think it's like lightning he's talking about here, or like flashes of fire, the very flame of the Lord. In other words, it will overwhelm you. It will consume you. It will seem as powerful to you as the power of God. And so at verse 7, many waters cannot quench love, neither can floods drown it. If a man offered for love all the wealth of his house, he would be utterly despised. That's why you should not start that fire until you're ready for it. Otherwise, you'll get burned. Yes, it's worth waiting for. So wait. 14th, and finally, love is public. All through the Song of Solomon, there are these others. Did you notice that? They come up here and there. In verse 8 here in this passage. They're this chorus that's speaking up, these friends. And they're encouraging the man and the woman to love. They are for this relationship. At the end of the last half of chapter 8, with a couple now safely in love and married, they mention another young girl coming along. And they have a little sister in verse 8. Now that's this community, the people around, family, friends, today we'd include the church, want to care for her. What shall we do? If she is a wall, they say, that is, she is virtuous, she is wise, she's not easily taken advantage of, she's committed to purity before marriage, she hasn't stirred up a craving for romance, and so isn't vulnerable to just anyone, then we will help her. We will build on her battlements of silver, kind of adorn her, but also support her. If she's a door, that is, she's easy to take advantage of. Now, it may not mean that she's immoral, only that she's vulnerable. She's vulnerable to seduction. She's easily taken in by the smooth talk of some cute guy. She's needy. She's naive. Well, then what? Well, it's her life, and you've got to let her make her own decisions. That's good old American individualism, isn't it? My love life is my business alone. No, it's not. It's public. And so we, the community around her, the church, will, at the end of verse 9, enclose her with boards of cedar. That is, we, as a community, will supply what she lacks in wisdom to preserve her purity. Now, of course, for that to work, she or he has to cooperate, has to be committed to this, committed to listen. She's going to be accountable. She's got to have that in her mind. She's going to be accountable. She's going to be accountable. Not going to run away if the others tell her what she doesn't want to hear. If there's no commitment, then there's no we. Nothing holding us together. And we can't protect someone from themselves when the temptations come hot and heavy. When Mary and I were dating, the elders of her church in Singapore sent a professor they knew there at the seminary to talk to her, make sure she was okay. They eventually asked her to come back to Singapore, leaving me in California, and she obeyed. She was accountable. She knew they weren't trying to deprive her of something good. And about a year later, those same elders, they performed our wedding. Love is public. Of course, the worldly person cannot understand this. What I've just said, the last point, is the most objectionable thing that you could possibly suggest to them. That there would be something you would allow to get in the way of love, something more important. Because for them, nothing is higher, nothing is greater than what they call love. It is as close to heaven as they will get. And that's the truth. It is as close to heaven as they will get. They know that, and that's the reality for them. And so it justifies anything. Any other relationship can be destroyed, even a previous marriage. Any commitment broken, any action justified, if it's done in the name of love. Love conquers all, says the world. Not at all meaning the self-giving love of the cross, but the passionately self-involved love of eros. Some have said that today, Christianity's greatest rival is not Islam, not even materialism, but eroticism, now meaning the love of sexual pleasure. But I think an even more powerful rival not just sex itself, but the whole apparatus of apparent love that it often comes in. Eros, by itself, exalted as a god. For that, nothing can be denied. It has to be honored unconditionally and obeyed without reservation. That's what the world thinks. And the worst crime today is telling someone that their love is forbidden. Even the Lord himself, some churches very clumsily imply, exist to maintain this God, Eros. That's why you so rarely hear these days Jesus is called to discipleship. In Luke chapter 18, verse 29, you must be willing to leave not simply brothers, that may be easy for many of us, or parents, or property. Okay, I'll divest myself of property. But can you believe it? Also, he says, wife, Eros, for the sake of the kingdom of God. Today we think the kingdom of God, sometimes churches imply this, is all about helping our relationship with our wife or husband. Eros over all. And yet the tragic irony is that as great as Eros, love, is, it drives us to promise what Eros itself cannot deliver. Romantic love, as we saw with what Lewis said, it makes us want to give something that itself is not capable of making us give. It drives us to give our lives, to commit ourselves till death do us part. But it can't enable us to keep those vows. That's why despite all the failed marriages in our day, which people you think would be assuming, why bother, let's forget about it, marriage and all that, people still want to get married. That's Eros. Keep telling them, get married. But they lack what it takes to keep those marriages together. They're in love, and theirs will last. And they believe that with all their heart. But that kind of love lacks the power to enable us to make good on the promises that it compels us to make. You know, it's famously fickle. We've probably all known people who will loudly proclaim they are in love and they will be in love until the stars grow cold. And next year it's someone else. It's not that romantic love is bad. It's simply not enough. It needs to be a jewel in a setting of untarnishable gold that holds it solidly in place. The greater love of God's steadfast love. You know, the one we saw, of all places, in Lamentations, in the ashes and in the rubble of an obliterated Jerusalem. The steadfast love of the Lord never ceases. His mercies never come to an end. Now, for us, it is in the cross that we find a covenant love that is sturdy enough to hold all our fleeting loves in place. Romantic love is a great thing, but it's not the greatest of things. Without the greater thing of God's covenant love, Eros becomes a god, a cruel god, and then a demon. And that's the tragic irony, of those who stir up this fire of love and end up pursuing it for its own sake. In the end, so often, such people, they don't get any kind of love. They just get burned. Instead, stir up and pursue the greater love of and love for the Lord. The greatest thing is not found at the marriage altar, but still at the cross.